Arthur Blank is heated, and the entire NFL is watching. The Atlanta Falcons owner and chairman is reportedly furious behind closed doors, and the tension inside that building has reached a boiling point. This is not a minor disagreement over roster decisions or a routine coaching debate that organizations navigate every offseason. This is something far more serious. The man Arthur Blank personally brought in to lead his franchise into the future is already threatening to blow up everything that has been carefully and deliberately constructed over the past several years. And the controversy surrounding Kevin Stefanski right now has nothing to do with play calling, offensive scheme design, or fourth down decisions. This is about the identity of the franchise. This is about the quarterback under center. This is about whether the vision that Arthur Blank built this roster around will survive the very coach he trusted to execute it. We are going to break down exactly what is happening inside that organization, why it matters far beyond the Atlanta Falcons, and what comes next for one of the most talented young rosters in professional football today. To understand why this situation has become so explosive so quickly, you have to understand what the Atlanta Falcons actually are right now. Because the picture this roster paints is not one of a rebuilding team searching for direction. This is a team with its foundation already poured, with young talent already in place, and with a trajectory that pointed clearly towards sustained success. The Atlanta Falcons are one of the most exciting young rosters in the entire NFL, and that is not a talking point. That is what the personnel reflects when you examine it honestly. Look at the names on that roster and what each of them represents. You have Michael Penix Jr., under center, a young quarterback who has already flashed the kind of raw talent and football instinct that franchises spend decades searching for and rarely find. Penix Jr. is not a project in the traditional sense. He is a player who has shown real moments of brilliance, the ability to read defenses, create under pressure, and deliver the ball with accuracy and conviction. Organizations that find that combination in a young quarterback do not discard it. They invest in it, protect it, and build around it. Then you have Drake London at wide receiver. London is one of the most physically imposing pass catchers in the league, a player whose combination of size, athleticism, and contested catchability makes him a genuine number one target. Alongside him, you have Kyle Pitts at tight end, a player whose skill set is so rare at his position that the Falcons selected him 4th overall in the 2021 NFL Draft. And in the backfield, you have Bijan Robinson, a running back who has looked like a future star every single time he touches the football. As Cam Newton himself stated when assessing this roster, you got Michael Penn as your quarterback, Drake London as your receiver, Kyle Pitts, Bijan. That's a very young team. It's like you're inheriting something that's already great and ready to rock and roll. That is the roster Kevin Stefanski walked into. That is the situation he inherited. Not a teardown. Not a rebuild from scratch. A loaded young team with pieces already in place. And a clear path forward. Arthur Blank did not assemble this roster by accident. Every decision, every draft pick, every personnel move was made with intention and with a defined vision at its core. That vision was straightforward. Identify young talent, develop it within the organization, build a winning culture from within, and position this franchise for a legitimate and sustained championship window. Blanc has watched these players grow. He has invested in them financially and organizationally. He has built a team designed to compete with Michael Penix Jr. as the centerpiece of that effort. And the city of Atlanta makes all of this carry even greater weight. Atlanta, Georgia is not just another NFL market. It is one of the most culturally significant cities in America. A city with a deep, generational connection to Black culture, Black excellence, and Black community. The Falcons fan base does not simply follow this team as a casual entertainment product. They are emotionally, culturally, and personally invested in what this organization represents. The players on this roster, young, talented, and representing the culture of the city, are not just athletes to these fans. They are a reflection of Atlanta itself. That cultural connection shapes expectations. It shapes accountability. And it shapes what it means when a coach comes into that environment and immediately begins working against the players and the vision that fan base has rallied behind. That is exactly what makes the reports now surfacing so alarming and so infuriating to everyone inside that building. Kevin Stefanski was hired to be the architect who takes all of this young talent and molds it into a championship contender. He was brought in to elevate the vision, not redirect it. He was not hired to walk into a situation loaded with young stars and immediately begin pushing for outside pieces to override the players this organization has been carefully building around. Nobody in that building can wrap their head around why a coach would enter a situation with this much established talent and immediately attempt to dismantle its direction. But that is precisely what the reports are now describing. According to sources surfacing out of the Atlanta Falcons organization, Stefanski has been pushing the front office to bring in a new quarterback for the upcoming season, and the details that have begun to emerge about this push have people inside and outside the organization raising serious questions about Stefanski's judgment and his commitment to the plan that was already in motion. This is not being framed internally as a competition, as bringing in a veteran presence to push Penix Jr. and sharpen his development. This is being characterized as an attempt to replace the direction the franchise was heading entirely. That distinction matters enormously. Arthur Blank's reported response to all of this? Fury. Real, documented, behind-closed-doors fury from the chairman who built this team, who signed off on every major decision, and who had a clear picture of where this franchise was going before Stefanski began pulling in a different direction. The front office has since held meetings to weigh their options, either move on from Stefanski or force him to fully commit to developing Michael Penix Jr. and staying on the path that was already established. No final decision has been announced, but the tension inside that organization is real, it is thick, and it is not going away on its own. Here is what makes this situation even more maddening for Falcons leadership. They did not hire Stefanski to come in and dismantle a vision. They hired him to execute it. They were looking for someone to take what Arthur Blank built and carry it to the next level. Instead, what they are getting is a coach who appears more interested in bringing in outside pieces to override the very players this organization has spent significant resources and years developing. And this brings us directly to Stefanski's track record, because his history does not provide much reassurance that his instincts here are sound. Before arriving in Atlanta, Stefanski spent approximately 6 years with the Cleveland Browns. In that stretch, the Browns cycled through 13 different quarterbacks. 13. That number alone demands examination. The list includes Baker Mayfield, Jacoby Brissett, Deshaun Watson, Joe Flacco, and a collection of others who came and went without producing any meaningful, sustained success at the position. No stability, no development, no championship contention built around a franchise quarterback. The question that Arthur Blank and the Atlanta Falcons front office now have to answer honestly is this. If Kevin Stefanski could not identify, develop, or commit to a franchise quarterback across 6 years and 13 attempts in Cleveland, what is the evidence that Atlanta will be different? And sitting directly at the center of that question is the situation involving Shedeur Sanders in Cleveland, a situation that Cam Newton identified as a defining example of exactly who Kevin Stefanski is as a coach, and exactly what he does with young black quarterbacks when given authority over their careers. Cam Newton did not wait for the drama to unfold before sounding the alarm. He did not sit back, observe quietly, and reserve judgment until the situation inside the Atlanta Falcons organization became public knowledge. The moment the Falcons announced Kevin Stefanski's hiring, Newton stepped forward immediately and publicly with direct, specific, and pointed criticism. His concerns were not vague or generalized. They were rooted in documented evidence from Cleveland, built around a specific situation involving a specific player, and aimed at a specific pattern of behavior that Newton believed would follow Stefanski from one city to the next. Newton questioned publicly how Falcons ownership could examine Stefanski's track record in Cleveland, particularly his handling of Shedeur Sanders, and arrive at the conclusion that this was the right man to lead their franchise. He was not diplomatic about it. He was not careful with his words in the way that former players sometimes are when they venture into current NFL affairs. Cam Newton came out firing, and his central argument was clear. Stefanski denied Shedeur Sanders a legitimate opportunity in Cleveland, not because Sanders lacked the talent to compete at the NFL level, not because Shedeur was unprepared or unqualified, but because of who Shedeur Sanders is, where he comes from, and what he represents culturally. Newton stated directly, "We've seen what you did with Shedeur, and it was unacceptable." That is not a mild critique. That is a former NFL MVP and Super Bowl quarterback going on record and saying that a current head coach behaved unacceptably toward a young player. And Newton did not stop there. He anticipated the counter-narrative. He knew that the response from those defending Stefanski would be to reframe Shedeur Sanders as the problem, to suggest that Sanders was not ready, that he needed more time, that the situation in Cleveland simply did not work out. Newton refused to allow that revision to take hold. He made clear that the real problem in Cleveland was not Shedeur Sanders. The real problem was the coach who was supposed to develop him and instead systematically denied him the opportunity to do so. Newton's cultural argument was equally direct. His position was that coaches like Stefanski have a documented and observable difficulty embracing authentic black culture, and that this difficulty becomes most visible and most damaging when it sits inside the quarterback room. The quarterback position is the most scrutinized, most analyzed, and most culturally loaded position in professional sports. Who gets the opportunity to play it? Who gets protected when they struggle? And who gets discarded when things get difficult? These decisions carry enormous weight. And Newton's argument was that Stefanski's decisions in Cleveland revealed exactly where he stands when a young black quarterback from an authentic cultural background is under his authority. Beyond the Shedeur Sanders situation specifically, Newton extended his criticism to the broader Atlanta roster and what he believes Stefanski's presence meant for the development of those young players. He was unambiguous. Players don't get better with Kevin Stefanski. And I'm looking at the personnel of the Atlanta Falcons. They're a young team. Newton made the case that Stefanski has not demonstrated the ability to develop young players at any point in his coaching history, and that this inability becomes most glaring and most consequential when those young players are black quarterbacks operating within an authentic cultural framework that Stefanski appears unwilling or unable to genuinely embrace. What gives Newton's warning its full weight right now is the timeline. Every word he spoke about Stefanski and the Atlanta Falcons was said before the current Penix Jr. situation became public. He was not reacting to breaking news. He was not responding to reports of internal tension inside the Falcons organization. He was drawing on evidence from Cleveland alone and projecting forward with a level of clarity that is now impossible to dismiss. Watching this situation unfold inside Atlanta in real time, it is genuinely difficult to identify a single thing Cam Newton said that is not proven to be accurate. The bigger picture that Newton was pointing toward throughout his criticism is a real, documented, and persistent pattern across the NFL, one that extends far beyond Kevin Stefanski and far beyond the Atlanta Falcons. When young white quarterbacks struggle early in their careers, the organizational response is typically one of patience, investment, and support. The narrative around those players centers on development, on surrounding them with better pieces, on adjusting the scheme to maximize their strengths. The organization rallies, the coaching staff adjusts, the front office invests. The quarterback is given time to grow because the belief in his long-term potential is treated as non-negotiable. When young black quarterbacks coming from authentic cultural backgrounds hit early struggles, the conversation frequently and rapidly shifts in a different direction. The questions that emerge are not about scheme adjustment or supporting cast improvement. The questions become about whether the quarterback himself is the problem, whether he is the right fit, whether the organization made a mistake investing in him in the first place. Cam Newton has lived this dynamic personally throughout his own career. He has watched it play out with other players, and he identified it clearly in what happened to Shedeur Sanders in Cleveland under Stefanski's watch. The Shedeur Sanders situation is not an isolated case study to be examined independently and then set aside. It is, as Newton framed it, Exhibit A in a larger and more significant argument about coaching culture, systemic bias, and who receives the benefit of the doubt in the NFL. When you connect what happened to Shedeur in Cleveland to what is now reportedly happening to Michael Penix Jr. in Atlanta, the pattern Newton described stops being an argument and starts being a documented reality, playing out across two cities, two rosters, and two young black quarterbacks whose careers intersect with the same head coach. The cultural disconnect that Newton highlighted is also impossible to overlook in this context. Kevin Stefanski comes from Cleveland, a market that looks, feels, and operates very differently from Atlanta. He is now the head coach of a franchise located in one of the most culturally black cities in America, leading a fan base whose identity is inseparable from the culture of the community surrounding it. Atlanta is not just a football market. It is a city where the Falcons are woven into the cultural fabric in a way that carries genuine significance. The players on this roster, young, talented, and representative of that culture, are connected to that fan base in a real and meaningful way. The disconnect between Stefanski's apparent coaching philosophy and the cultural environment he is now operating within could not be more visible. As of now, the Atlanta Falcons front office is reportedly weighing two primary options, and neither of them is simple or without consequences. The first option is to move on from Stefanski before this situation deteriorates further, to make the determination that the damage already done to the relationship and the organizational culture is significant enough that continuing down this road serves nobody, least of all the players. The second option is to force Stefanski into a firm, public, and unambiguous commitment. Michael Penix Jr. is the franchise quarterback, the development plan stays intact, and there is no deviation from that course regardless of what Stefanski may personally prefer. No final decision has been announced. The tension inside that building remains real and unresolved. 3 outcomes are now in play, and each carries its own set of consequences. Arthur Blank could overrule Stefanski entirely and declare Penix Jr. The unquestioned franchise quarterback. No negotiations, no ambiguity, no room for Stefanski to maneuver the situation in a different direction. Or the organization could conclude that this relationship has already been compromised beyond repair and move on from Stefanski early, before the internal conflict becomes fully toxic and begins affecting the players in the locker room. Or, and this represents the most damaging scenario, the tension continues to fester without resolution. The internal divide grows deeper, and the players who have done absolutely nothing wrong throughout this entire situation are the ones who ultimately pay the price for it. Cam Newton warned Atlanta. He examined the evidence from Cleveland, looked at Stefanski's history with young black quarterbacks, and sounded the alarm loudly, publicly, and specifically. At the time, some dismissed his criticism as premature. Some suggested he was being too aggressive in his judgment of a coach who had not yet had the opportunity to prove himself in Atlanta. But watching this drama unfold inside the Falcons organization right now, in real time, with the same patterns Newton identified in Cleveland beginning to take shape in Atlanta, it is hard to find a single element of his warning that has not proven accurate. Michael Penix Jr. deserves better than this. The Atlanta Falcons deserve better than this. This city, this culture, and this fan base deserve a head coach who genuinely believes in the players wearing that jersey, who walks into that building every day committed to developing what is already there rather than dismantling it. Arthur Blank knows it, the front office knows it, and the entire football world is watching to see what they decide to do about it.